the kinot, with a number of kinot. There are about 5 different editions of kinot, so at least, it's just a matter of looking up the number on your particular edition. It's almost the identical one for every one edition, but you may have to turn some pages because we're going to be leaving out many of the things. There will also be a special kinot at the end for the recent events, our Barzell, and those will be given out later on. Yeah, though I sleep a bit.
I think nowadays, Tisha B'Av is normally a day that we find somewhat difficult to connect. And I think the greatest proof of that is the way that we recite kinot. Previous generations, the kinot read themselves. It didn't take much effort. We all know stories we've heard, previous generations. Kinot books that we drenched with tears. The emotion was palpable. So that was what people lived through, spoke to their experience. And in recent years, the idea of doing kinot in this way, with explanations, with commentary, become more and more prevalent. I think it's not just to do with the language. It's not just to do with the translation, but it's to do with the emotion. To do with the fact that many of these poems do not, or did not speak to us. So we thought. I remember 10 years ago, our eldest son was born 4 days before Tisha B'Av. And I remember sitting with my wife in the hospital on that day, marveling at the miracle of new life, finding it very, very difficult to connect to the tragedy of the Qurban of Tisha B'Av. And on a national level as well, having experienced that rebirth, Rav Chaim David Alevi as a Tshuva, when he writes after 1967, he writes, he was at the Kotel, the first Tisha B'Av, after the 6-day war. And he writes how on Tisha B'Av, the mood was not of mourning, but almost of celebration. And that's how it was for many years. Every year, we know we haven't yet achieved Geula Shlema. We know that we still await the Beit HaMikdash. But we also know that Jewish life is very, very different to the way it was. And people have grappled with how to relate to Tisha B'Av, how to relate to kinot that are relics of an ancient past. And then tennis. And if I told you a year ago that this Tisha B'Av would be sitting here, there would be new kinot composed in our generation because of the things that had happened, I don't think you would have believed it. And we spoke last night how this year, tragically and unfathomably, we have so much to cry for. And as we go through those kinot now, we'll begin in a few moments, we may get a sense of what our ancestors went through. We may get an inkling, small inkling of the emotions, of the free-flowing tears, as we mourn the tragedies not just of your past, but the tragedies of today. So as we read the kinot, we'll make reference not just to those things, those events about which they were originally composed, but for those things which have transpired that are in the forefront of all of our minds. Kinot themselves are unusual. Normally, even in the face of tragedy, the Jewish response is not to complain, it's not to bemoan, it's not to lament. The Jewish response is Tiduk Adin. The Jewish response is to say, Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. When Rabbi Akiva was being tortured to death by the Romans, his response was, all my life I've waited for this moment, waited to know when I could fulfill the mitzvah of B'chol Nafshecha, even when he takes your soul. When Aaron HaKohen lost his 2 sons, his response was Vayidom Aharon, and he was silent. Nothing to say. There's nothing we can answer back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And yet, in the face of the Khurban, in the face of this unspeakable tragedy, that is precisely the response. Kinot begin. We read last night, we read again this morning, the book of Eicha. Eicha is the first kinot. The word Eicha means what? Why? How could it be? How is it possible? How did this happen? How could the unthinkable come to be? And that's the question that Yirmiyahu and Nabi asks, and that Soloveitchik explains is the opening of kinot. That is our taking license, as it were, to be able to say kinot. Because ordinarily that is not something that we can say. That is something that we say. So mentioned last night, Korban is not about sticks and stones. It's about Hashem moving out of our lives. It's about the state of Esther, Panim, of darkness, which engulfs our world to this very day. That's why Rashi writes in Divrei Yamim that if one has something to mourn for, anything at all, we mourn for it. On Tisha B'Av, all the tragedies we've gone through, that we go through, are lumped together on this day. The first kinah that we'll say, kinah number 6, Shavat Suru Meni. This kinah is the first of a set of 15. We won't recite all 15. Composed by Rabbi Elazar Khalil. Some discussion as to exactly who Khalil was when he lived. According to Tosfot, they identify him as Rabbi Elazar Gadol, the Tana. Let's feel he may have lived later. Either way. This kinah, each verse begins with the word from Eicha. The opening verse, paragraph. Shavat Suru Mimeni is based on the pasuk towards the end of Eicha. It says, Shavat Masos Libeinu. Joy has ceased from our lives. And the word Shavat, more than anything else, connotes suddenness. Suddenly, out of nowhere, in an instant, everything changed. So it says, when God was creating the world, he stopped in one moment. Human beings cannot tell, but that instant, suddenly, from creation to rest, going into Shabbat. And that is what happened with the Churban. Despite the warnings, despite years and years, the Jewish people were warned. We were told it was coming. We were told it would happen, yet no one could believe it. We read in Eitan, kings, the world, no one could believe, no one could imagine. The enemy would actually break through. Yet in one moment, the Jewish people faced a reality where the Beit HaMikdash was gone. I don't need to elaborate on the parallel for our days. We woke up on October 7th on Simchat Torah. It took time before we understood what had happened. So many illusions were shattered. So many conceptions were broken. Who could have thought, who could have imagined we are a military and technological powerhouse? We have the most sophisticated weaponry, the most sophisticated surveillance, the most sophisticated border patrols. Impossible. It couldn't happen. Yet it did. Next Shabbat. Suddenly, in an instant, everything was broken. It's mentioned two more of the lines that we're saying. We'll begin the kinah. Again, as we go through it, the words are so resonate so deeply. The kinah says, Ra'ita ki katanur oreinu chamaru. Imagery of a burning oven. Imagery of children, babies. And the kinah goes on, it says, Zaken, Bachur, Tulak, Valanu, the young and the old, being taken off in chains as hostages. Mentioned last night, still have the young, the old, babies. Ariel Bibas, whose fifth birthday has just passed. So we say the kinah Shabbat. If that's sort of man, in an instant, everything changed. Shabbat Shalom, Yom Moses Simoni, Ben Lecha Belai, Sakot Amishkan Miskot Belai, Sakot Avot Begut Belai, Sakot Avot Tu Ebalai, Kesila Kol Belai, Odin Betul Bia. Ini kita khaswan ben ya apilai tinggal sabuya ini model dibanding sabuya asal nikah baiklah ya benar ada ni ya אבני יכולה תפצו חסידיה, עוד יסוף זרקה, כעלוי יסודיה, תחת חי שילות רחב סודיה, פצו חסיליה, ויהיה חסידיה, פצו מסל בנתיה, שעשה ציון בידיה, סתו שונים בדניים, צחו על ראשי זדוני, צמתו בנום לעמוד זדוני, סוף נפח ללב אדוני, צעק עמי בני בן דיני, צדיקו אדוני. צעק עלי נקבעת ומביא אמוני, הלכת בו אליי ואפינוני, קראתי ליושבי גבעון עוד הם זרמוני, קראית להשמיע ועליו הקדימוני, ומי יבולי ותנר לימוני, קראתי למאהבה הם הלימוני, למה רוח אבינו לטבח שמרו, ראית כי נתנו אלינו חמרו, ראית כי המלאכה ציוויך גמרו, רבת ביד יחזקאל במקום כמו מרו, ראה ונחיתני גוי אמרו, ראה אדוני כי צרתי, מאיך אמרו, השיבנו כפי שמע דברי ואני, שבתם עמוס חצי עד גאלי, שפתי משוללי ונעדני, שמעת צמחות הפכינת עדני, שחרו ונעדו חצת לעדני, שמו כננך אני, איתם חקת פותח פניך, ושיב להם גמול תעד חזור פניך, תירוב לסבון נוצא בה על צפונך, תיתן אהבה ונוצא פניניך, תקרא לשקבן חוס כמוס בפניך, תבוא כל רעך בפניך, תבוא אל צער אשר קיבלנו, יבוא חמק בחרמן יחדנו, הלך ובחבור הבלנו, זכה ובחור ובתולה כבדנו, למה בינם חכו לנו, צפור אדוני, בנעינו.
The next kinot, one immediately following the one which we just did. This one also is from Hagir, and it's styled like the Sefer Eicha. Begins with Eicha. Each stanza begins with Eicha. In fact, in the book of Eicha, 3 of the 5 chapters start with Eicha. One chapter starts with the Safar, and each of these stanzas starts with Eicha and finishes with the Safar, and so here again, the Kinot styles himself on the same way. Eicha is an expression of unbearable pain. How is it? We often know the answer to the question. We know why there was a Korban Habayit, or at least we have a fairly good idea what the Averis were of each generation. And so it's not really a question that we are seeking an answer for. It's rhetorical, and it's an expression about pain. But this particular kinot is really quite challenging. It's reasonably quite a provocative style by Kavir. And it contrasts the pain, the Eicha, the feeling of destruction, of isolation, of abandonment after the Korban. First Korban, second Korban, indeed all the troubles and tribulations that the Jewish people have been going throughout their history. And within each stanza, it contrasts that terrible pain and suffering with the reason why that suffering should never have happened in the first place. There is a challenge in nearly all of these stanzas to the suffering, as if to say, yes, we violated certain covenants, but didn't you break your vows as well? We're making a challenge to our Kodesh Baruch Hu. We see this already in the very first stanza, where the kinot begins, Eicha Atzkov Alpha. Straight away, this is a provocative statement. How could you rush with your anger? Where was the rush? The Jewish people during Korban Bayis Rishon and Korban Bayis Sheni, there were plenty of warnings that things weren't going right. There were plenty of Bali Mutta, they were Nevi'im during the first period. Destruction took hundreds of years to come to their fruition. And the Jews were well warned, and yet Eicha Atzkov. Why did you accelerate your effort? So that itself is a challenging statement. Now, baby, therefore to destroy your faithful ones in the hands of the Edomites. And after all, and this is the other challenge, it's the theological challenge against that destruction. Did you not promise us that we were going to be your people forever in the great day of Zion, which was conducted between Hashem and Abraham? We are the promised people. How can we be evicted and treated in such a way? And we see more examples of this as we go through Ephahata, the Hekyothar, Lozochata, Viud, Beses. We have the El-Heloim, we have the Beit HaMikdash. That's supposed to mean the Shekhinah would be with us forever. So that is simple. And yet you brought your own Beit HaMikdash, your own Shekhinah to an end. In the fourth stanza, just feel the alliteration and the power of poetry here as well. How could you abandon your Beit HaMikdash in rage and in anger? How did you do that? You've broken a vow. Do you not remember the wedding vows we took at Sinai? The Medrash very much compares the kinot Torah, Matan Torah, to a wedding, which if you like, the nuchas were given as if they were a ring from husband to wife in a proposal. It's supposed to be a lifelong arrangement. You have broken that vow by abandoning us, by evicting us from Eretz Yisrael and destroying our sanctuary. And this is the way in which the kinot progresses all the way through. It's a contrast between the Lord's state we find ourselves in and the state of union we believe we deserve to be in because of the vows made by the eternal to us, which we find now have been destroyed, and the vow no longer seems to apply. Let's do this kinot 7. As part of Greece, they have started to interact with the Bechem Tinus for Adonai. Even the art of the Armasta, the light, we have gained good level. And it's a fact that we have been observed as a deducted to level, the Bechem Dibar, for Adonai. Even had to make the other than have level. But it's a fact of the best that should be added to good level. The geven, de neef, de nooie hoor. Even zo'n activiteit van de dag en die afzorging voor leggen. Er is ook water kitchen de boek in verder als je van kakken en dan leggen. Geen gemeenten zo kort je van. Even zo dat de zorg van de terug die aan zijn neef maar leggen. Er is ook water je kan je niet eens juist als je gaat het zo die je leggen. Er is geen journal dat graag en van leggen. Even die water gaat van alles die aan keuze kan leggen. Maar dat is al gaat, er is nog de lange maar dat ik goed krijg. Dat geen kan hebben, is gewoon nooit meehouden. Even die auto dat afspraak, dat grootste die aan hun gezegd dat het zo gaat, is eerst een stadslesje als je staat en het zo weggaat. Maar geen nog heel, dat gewoon nooit meehouden. Even zag tot de zaak, dus dat je had samen staat, even het zo gaat, en is dat je aan het als je het gaat, dan het tegen. Dat geen manier voor van de hooi. Even plaats op een pad van een parkeer, voor iets in het heffen. Maar zo gaat het samen, tweet zeggen, als je het zo gaat, en het voor heffen. Geen zo absoluut voor en dan mee van de land. Even verrassen, de kriosten, dat is via coming through heffen. En dan zo gaat er met geschreven, voor staan, als je het ziet, door heffen. Dat geen erop gaan, voor en dan mee van Even schaaf van de chaleur die aan schudden in zijn metal. Dat is ook gaat, dat ik altijd zo als je die kanten in mijn metal. Dat ging aan het schoren. Dat hadden we gewoon kabij en amabi en zei, ik viel aan mij. Zo in die je schudden speciaal in je schudden. Kanti, water, aarde, goed, afschudden. Kinot 8. Vet, aarde,
kinot. So it's somewhat complicated alphabetic acrostic. If you look, you'll see first letter, first three lines, in each stanza begins with an aleph. The second letter begins going from aleph to lamed, through the alphabet. And the second letter of the fourth line goes through reverse order from time to end, going through the whole alphabet. And the theme, one of the themes here of this kinot, that this was an event of Churban was not just limited to us, the Jewish people. This was a cosmic catastrophe. This was an event which affected the entire world. This was an event which changed the nature of the universe itself. Therefore, we say, it's not just us that we cry, we turn to the heavens, but for them to cry with us as well. Invite heaven itself to join our lament. Stay, which was cursed twice it was destroyed. That is, of course, referring to Beit Kenessset Hanassi, Beit Kenesset Hanassi, both of those Churban which took place this day. Since October 7th, we have practically a new meaning for our whole Yom HaLevi. So many families, so many who were affected on this day, not just once, but twice, sometimes more. Families who lost a father and a brother, lost two brothers, a son and a daughter. All Yom HaLevi, so many. And as the kinot goes on, there's a theme here, to what we said previously, a theme of searching out to God, trying to find, trying to reach Him, trying to renew that connection that we had once upon a time, that opportunity that we had, which we lost. We lost the Chet HaEgel, we lost the Tet Raglim so many times throughout in our history. We spent our lives, we spend our national history searching for that connection with God, and as we reach it, we get a glimpse of it. And once again, due to our misgivings and due to our mistakes, moves back. He removes himself from us. That is the idea here of the fourth paragraph. See it. The troubled heart I will seek Him. Learn the words, I will seek out words by which to, and here it's translated, encourage Him. The word ametz. It's the word on Hebrew, not to try, to hold fast to somebody, not to let them go. I will seek Him, I will look for Him, but I'm unable to find Him. That is the kinot, that is the tragedy over here, that we keep finding ourselves back, stuck in the same cycle again and again and again. 2 paragraphs later, by time makes reference to this, he says, so every year that comes round, every year we say to ourselves, this year will be different. This will be the end. This year there will be no more tears. This year we will live up to our expectations, we will live up to our standards, and we will come to know Him, we will come to be close to Him. Yet it's not to be. In number 8, כל יום מחליפי פעמיים את עונן מייתן בו שמיים תבחין בלכי אליו במדבר אבחנה להם מגלנו מדבר ממדבר אבקי ציונה מדבר אשתק מתנני במדבר מדבר במחשב לא נפסייס אגב יקור פני בית אגרום שאומר בבית תלשם יתנני שם ישיים אז בכל לב נעמסהו מילים פעם נעמסהו את האגמוה באמצענו כהן מתן ידעתי באמצענו אהבה ותותך שפוק במילה פנים בפנים נצטנות עלי ארוך חלס אותם מלהגיע ספח מתן אמו מתנתון מילה הולך משפטי כל ואלי, אותיו בביצי ומעלי, נבלו נזלות וקוראים לי, אפונה ייתן לי שומע לי. עשתה גופי, עליונה, אתגרתי אותי בחותנה, אסיף פלגים כבריחה עליונה, ניתן לי עבד עליונה, אך נמשך קריאה חסד טוב, אכלו בלי מים ואף לעצור, לחץ כמות לקצור ולילות לקצור, אסיחה מיולידני ילמצור. יצא העולה אבל אני קצת מוות, נטוסה וישכונה, חצה מוות. אטפל את המשחקים למוות, עיניהם יגבר יחיה ונראה מוות. העלותי לאכלתי דלתי לחזור, היו מתי בכל שנה אומרת היא השנה הזאת. ידע לכל מי מודע זאת, אם לא כי יד אדוני עשתה זאת. יבוא לך ראש חילי, לך לך מלך להכתב לי. אכתבך בשיר משירי בחולי, אכבד מתמך כאחדי. אל תשכח תקת ארגל, אלא בגוד יהודה ישראל, אלפי שנאה השם ישראל, לאמור מיתן מציון ישיבת ישראל. ישראל ועת בדרכי לא הלכו, עזבו לי בצפתים, פניי הם נמחו, רגמתי ואילמתי ומעט ליבי נשפכו, אחד דיברתי מעל שפייתי.
The, the next kinot is about the Melech Yoshiyahu, and it's Yud Aleph, it's on page Yud Aleph. This part of the kinot is asking deep philosophical questions. And I think that one of the questions that we all ask ourselves in these days is, what can I do? I'm constantly finding myself saying that. And I think we're all struggling with our own place in the tragedies that we see. And this kinot, the career is doing the same thing. He's asking, what is the place of a tzaddik, of someone who wants to just do good? How is it that tragedies happen? And Melech Yoshiyahu, it is said about him that he was a great king. In Malachim Bet, chapter 23, it's written about him that Yoshiyahu be'er Lamad Hakim et Divrei HaTorah Ktuvim al HaSefer Asher Matzachu Kiyav HaKohen Beit Adonai V'kamo lo hayad Lefanav Melech, and before him there was no king like him. Asher Shav El Adonai, who returned to God, V'chol Levavo, V'chol Nafsho, V'chol Eldo. With all of his strength, with all of his might, he returned to God, Kekol Horat Moshe, Ve'acharav Lo Kan Kamo. And afterwards, there was none like him. And I think the kabir in this kinot is partly asking, how is it that with this kind of a tzaddik, with this kind of a king, shortly after all of the tragedies happened and the temple was destroyed, and if you look in the stanza of Gimel, third one, God b'chol malchei Yisrael asher kamu ligdor, lo kam kamo b'yamot avigdor. Of all the kings who stood to rule, not any of them was great like Avigdor, which is a reference to Moshe Rabbeinu. And then in Dalet, the Kalir tried to give a type of an answer based on a midrash. Davak bochet leitzanei hador, asher kamu achar hadelet listo. So basically, part of the answer here that the Kadir is giving is that although Yeshayahu was such a tzaddik, he was affected by his surroundings. And it was those people who were steeped in idol worship who caused the destruction. And in the next part, Asher Kamu Achar Hadelet Door, he is referring to a midrash in Eicha Rabbah that in those days the idol worshippers would put their surot of Avodah Zarah, their pictures of Avodah Zarah, their idols behind the door, and there would be, so when they came in, you wouldn't see it. They would only see it when the person left. So even if you were trying to find these idols, you wouldn't find them because they were hidden behind the door. So it's not only a reference to a midrash in Eicha Rabbah, it's a reference to a pasuk in Yeshayahu, which also has a pasuk Acharei Hadelet, and these kinot are very rich in their references both to midrashim, to psukim, which there's not enough time to explain. But I think asking ourselves the question of what can I do? And how do I react when I see something wrong? I think those we need to ask ourselves. And that is what partly this kinot is trying. So kinot Yudah. Eli kavinu ela ben shmona shana ekan mitrosh Eloha v'nichavu lo uzkarlo tigui b'ala גם בכל מלכי ישראל אשר קמו לדור, לא קם כמוהו מימות אביגדור, דבק פוחד דור, אשר קמו אחר הדלת לדור, אוכלים זרע שחור, מתמו והטוב, מתחמו משחור, מגדל אבות והשיב ימין אחור, ועוד שלח ידו מן אחור, זכוי מרח, נתן תקים. B'tzadi b'tov ba'arur asher lo yakim, hashach ta'oro kinazor chokim, v'v'tzaro ha'sedat chukim, tovim ra'im nikra'u b'shofo balach, ma'ni balach hayom leta'ach, yadei ha'aretz damim b'malach, v'yadei sh'vitzei etei balach, tfilah. Samat Tabor Cheret Kol Shuhu B'Ephraim Lo Shema L'Chozen L'Shuv B'Choraim G'Gezerah L'Sachtet Mitzrayim B'Mitzrayim Michatov Stira Mizodot Chazon Antotai Kol L'Mazot L'Avu Anamim L'Chomot L'Abzot V'Lo Yitzei Manati Bro'azot Suru Heidu Atov Shiyari Manusur Mati Sod Nishia Yenekra Evelu Altala Ritia V'Yoru Aturim Melech Yoshia Semina V'Yahu V'Tzim Etz Achachetz Morim V'Lochatzim Sadu V'Samu Kematara V'Tzim Yisraku Shalosh Me'ot Chitzim Kalim Satetu Acharav Zon Motzaviu Ve'ed Mitzui Nefesh Miasav Eviu Ruach Svatav Mitzam Eviu Sadiku Alai Kikriskiu Sinsin of Kikinazav Teshalem Saram On Mitzam Tam Ketem Kotu B'Sham Shibam V'Konen Alav Kolei Chai Amzabah במקרה אחר כוס נקידו, לשתות במועד שנת השמיטה, אינה הקל לאותו תל"ג ב-22 מהראש שתות, יספרו לו איכה ב-22 אותיות קינות, מבוטלה מחולי, עת כי שכחתי מחוללי, זכרתי כי לעד Rashati Benasati Bentash Oari.
Next kinot, it's the echo of there. Kima, Kima, you give kinot 13. It's great. Echo of it, of the better. The respect of sorry for here on its hey. Out of the goats to my spirits up, the love of it, but up. Echo of the spell, I know, that's so simple. And what will be true, it is simple. Take up to the room, you fell, right, simple. Yes, I have a pocket, sir, simple. Echo of top, as I put it on my throat. Oh, you are sure. They are talking about you, and they are sure. I'll be more there for myself. Take hold of our rapid street, but I'm not over there. But you think, oh, but I don't go there. Total come over there, Charlie Ravier, I suppose there. Take no time, we should not go over there for. With the lavish I'm not there for. I think I should go there for the day, people there for. Child to rare, we kept it like that for. The crowd research, that was shows the research. Total market access live, save source. And I thought like Golden Alley, and also there's some go to songs. It much more, inshallah, gives a man in the fire, Buddha. And Atonia, soon the day of the Buddha, the lady, Ecosia, Shishimosios, and Dunas, also our foolish to go into us. In toss, stupid, this was 8. Eco where there are to share for. They should have posted out there, woman to share for. They are talks of you in for share for. She'll go H to share for. And don't keep asking me usually for. First half of the hand, how long the east side on there for. They are sort of like, she'll be reissued from it for. Or it's still doing charge there for. Eco she was so cross, evidence, first half the shishit, your that's your common of it. They are so showing of it. So from over it. They could show us as to my own saw. The Koma also. They have talked to people for a guy, so I will try and give. Next one, so partial. So, kinot inside. 16.
Page number of this volume.
There are four different editions. In the Shul edition, it's probably page 125. That's kinot 16, page 125. If you look at the other edition, it's different. 125.
And number 16. It's a very emotive and descriptive kinah. Based on the Gemara Gittin and based on the Midrash that talks about Titu Sarasha entered the Beit HaMikdash. He came into the Kodesh Kedoshim. Zaholet Asher Atzal Tzal Bifnim, what their foe did inside. Lifnei Lifnim Shalach Chalbo Oba Lifnei Lifnim. He pulled out the sword and he came. It's the Holy of Holies, it's the Kodesh Kedoshim, as we know. No one is allowed to enter. Only the Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippurim. And if anybody with the slightest impure thought would go into that holy sanctum, they would be struck down immediately. But that is not what happened. Jesus went inside, he pulled out his sword, and he struck the Marochet. Right tells us that it began with blood. That's what it says over here. He had some in a bite of Chabot and Adam. He emerged, his sword filled with blood, and he thought, as it were, that he had defeated God, so to speak. And this kinah draws a very sharp contrast between, again, what should have happened. Should have been in a holy place. We know the sons of Aaron were bringing an Esh Zarah, were bringing a foreign fire, even though their intention was good. Yet they were struck down. This evil enemy came in and did the most unspeakable acts. The Kinai alludes to what he did furthermore. Brought a Zonah into the Kodesh Kodashim. Again, resonates so deeply with the sexual violence that took place on October 7th. That is what he did inside the most holy of places, that complete and total defilement. Yet there was no response. There was nothing. There was silence. And again, in this kinot, we cry out to God and we say, how could it be? If not for us, then for you, for your honor, for your glory. Thinking a lot over the last few months about tefillah that we say in Yomim Noraim. Shoshana Yom Kippur, we come into Hashem, we say, V'chein kavod. V'chein kavod Hashem na'amecha, tila li le'echa, v'tvat oshecha. Give glory, honor to your people. We see here in this kinot, what we saw in our day was the complete opposite of it. It's a complete chilul Hashem. The desecration of his name and the enemies of God, because the enemies of the Jewish people are the enemies of God, when they can run around freely, laughing what they're doing. Gemara says, the men of the Great Assembly were so called because they, their returned form of glory. It says, Moshe Rabbeinu said, Moshe refers to God as the great, Gadol, Gibor, Nora. Difficult words to translate. Variations on the same theme. And then came Yirmiyahu. And Yirmiyahu said, where is his glory? When the enemies were now cackling in his sanctum. I never understood what Nochrim Makakarim Be'eshalom means. Well, I heard the recording from October 7th. Recording of a phone call of a terrorist monster on October 7th, when he takes the phone of his victim and he calls his parents in Glee. I'm sure many of you have heard the recording. It's in Arabic, you don't have to be able to understand the words to understand what is going on. It says in complete glee, he says ecstasy. He says, I killed 10 Jews with my bare hands. And the father runs to call the mother and says, we are so proud of you, my son. That is not real Makakarim. This area, can we call him Nora? Can we call him awesome? Says Daniel, they've taken his children, captive, enslaved. Where is his hurrah? Where is his strength? Okay, Beit Kenessset Hanassi said, "Sochi k'varato shekovesh tibor shenoten elech habayit shel." The fact that he shows that he is restrained, ironically, paradoxically, there is his Quran. That is what we say in the Skinah as well. When Titus did what he did, he did as he wished. For who? Referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who asul ba'azdikin, as if he is restrained and he is in chains. Skinah talks about the silence, talks about the utter disbelief. Again, the same You saw the messages, the WhatsApp messages from Kibbutz Be'eri and other places that went on that day. As the enemy came inside, came into the holiest places. And everybody wondered, where is the answer? Where is Tzahal? Where is the army? Surely it's just a few moments they will come and they'll save us all, they'll rescue us all. Surely it cannot happen. But Baruch Hu will stop it. He will restore the honor to his name. To that we be. Kedvav number 16, 7 fourths on page, or Tezayin, so page 125 in the Shul edition, 228 in the Art Scroll edition, 361 in the Korean edition, and 111 in the rest. זכור את אשר עשה צר לפנים, שלח בו לפני ולפנים. נחמתנו בעת כתימי לחם הפנים, וגידל ברוך את בניו שתי פנים. יתומים יהיה במגן אדם, וימתך במלא אדם טעם. ממנו דלך והזכיר חיצה מדם, כי יצא מן הבית ובוא מאדם. ותו אבות גבה, מצרים בכל דבר בשבח גבה, ואני בתור יבוזר, אני סלק צבא. וכאילו צבא, עיר כניסו נחלה אחרי האש, וזה סורה זונה הכניס ולא נפתח האש. עבדים כיתו בסוכות את בת אש, והרבה בבית אש, חלום שלח אש, ונשינו, טבענו, לא תקדי שלט, טבען בוני שיידי, בני שלט. וראינו נמאס, ישבי בשלט, ומצא 93 כדי שלט. נשים ישאלו גבעה ארץ, ופלג הבית נערה תכלית, שרים ופתו בו פריט, ובתקודש הקודשים, הפריש ריבית. ואמורים יבחרו, סגרו וחוזקים, ותבלו כי יוזק ב60 ולפור מזיקים. זקנים נבעטו כי יושו משחקים, עשו רצונו, תראו עשו בזיקים. שבת סותם לעבוד מון, ויסרב חומה ויאבד המון. נפלה עברה, הנה קצה לך לוס להמון, הנקים אותך מתוך המון. בטח על הבית יחד החור, עד עבר ראשי תפסילך נחזרי בו. הצעת מערבי לזכר ישריד בו, וצג אחר פנינו, ולא רב ריבו. ואתה קצבת ברשת אלפנות, ילדים אשר הם לכל ברוך משם מתבנות. למה רק שהוא באים ולשת על המלחמות, שיוכלו לרצות בשלוש ספינות. קיבלנו שיבו כמו בנפסיים, ושצבו עצמם יחד לכל בים, שיר ותשבחות שלו כאן ים, יעליך הולדנו בצורת ים. יתרון לעבוד נפשן, כל זאת חנו ולשלחנו חילול נפשן. תקוותם נתנו למשל נבשן, והכל נשמע אולי. למה תשאל? Okay, the next kinot, the 17th, the sign. This kinot is a repeating refrain. Each time there is a verse, begins, it's based off Echad. Based off the pasuk in Echad, it says, Re'eh Hashem v'arvitza d'miolal takol t'chalna nashim b'ilgam. Women would eat their own fruit, such was the starvation, such was the devastation in Yerushalayim at the time of the Qurban. Think of it, women eating their own babies. That is the only way they could survive. And after each verse, we say, Alad woe is to me, woe is me, based on the verse of Iyov. And again, this is another kinot which describes the most gruesome violence. The most gruesome violence which we thought could not repeat itself. We thought is unimaginable and certainly would never happen again in our days. Story here, one of the lines said, "Vatikshavna asosim bochim," after being tied to racing horses. This is an allusion It's a story in the Midrash about Miriam but Hyksos. And during the time of this persecution, she was bound to the tail of a horse. When the horse began to gallop, she was killed. Rav Soloveitchik writes how this atrocity was perpetrated not only 1900 years ago, but in our own time as well during the Holocaust. He says it happened to a cousin of his, Yishayahu Glickson. His father was Rabbi Hirsch Glickson, and his mother was the daughter of Chaim Brisk. Rav Soloveitchik, he knew Yishayahu was slightly younger than him very well. He was a righteous person and a great scholar. The Nazis, Machshemam, conquered Warsaw. They found him and his wife in the first week after their wedding. Tied him to one automobile, his wife to another, drove off at a high speed. Resulted in their gruesome deaths. Says Rav Soloveitchik, this is precisely the same story related by the kinot. So these acts of violence, unspeakable acts in the kinot, we thought they could not repeat themselves. They were repeated during the Shana, and we thought they would never repeat again. They were repeated again afterwards. We've heard the eyewitness testimonies of holy volunteers, the people of Zaka, people who were in Shura, the army Chevra Kadisha, people who their entire lives have volunteered, they've been in disaster zones, have collected body parts from the most unspeakable crimes, and they said they've never seen what they saw now. The kinot talks about bodies being cut up. אם תזמן הבשר אבות לבנים במעלות ובשיחים, found the flesh, found the bodies in caves, in the bushes, hiding between the rocks. We know that after October 7th, it took months for some of the bodies to be identified. You can only imagine what needs to be done to a body that it takes months before one can tell. Archaeologists sifting through remains. It's not just in the days of the Korban, it was in the days now since October 7th. And the theme which this kinot stresses is the cruelty towards the children, specifically towards the children. Again, here, Soloveitchik writes, and says the urge to kill children was more compelling than the desire to kill adults. From the viewpoint of the psychopath, this type of killing satisfies the psychopathic urge to a greater degree. The murderer sees the future of the people and the children. He wants to destroy the future. Once the children are killed, the future is destroyed. I remember seeing a video a number of months ago. There was a renowned children's hospital in Israel, Schneider. Somebody asked after October 7th, when everybody was immediate aftermath, dealing with all the injured, those critically injured, all those severely injured. You know how many children came to Schneider Hospital after October 7th? How many children were treated in Schneider after Simchat Torah? The answer is none. Because they murdered every single one of them. Number 17 of Zion, page 127, short edition of 234 in the Art Scroll, 375 in the Koran, 20 in the rest. So how then should you be able to typically in Zwashad noch manioter behen, akudim spachit vache, to go us na Bertosha, shall have a simple Tibak, which I got necklace head with 2 months in it. If the home, Nazulu, going to Bashet, and then it's okay.
Nitibana Sunusu, Nitanet, Luka, Boy, Metahi, Nitazamena, Salomon, Lebanim, Bimahot, Beshishim, Alani, Nitabuyana, Banot, Fetimotan, Nipachi, Alani, Satos, Namu, Poto, Levitim, Hobot, Kiriat, Puchi, Alani, Nitingalna, Shipur, Lechem, Tzimuk, Shadai, Neman, Banim, Shachim, Alani, Sakashana, Shmonikon, Magidin, Bala, Ruchim, Alani, Imtohana, Muhammad bin Rohim, Rodot, Rohim, Alani, Imtohana, Melet Mea, Mena, Salah, Echat, Babachim, Alani, Imtohana, Mena, Nastafeta, Motivet, Kohanim, Kohanim, Alani, Imtohana, Shakorotan, Fashot, Likutim, Suri, Alani, Imtohana, Danakish, Motivet, Kohanim, Nitzachim, Alani, Intibaafna, Fashot, Zukalim, Melet, Novosichim, Alani, Intizabana, Evnachan, Ishaka bin Mochei, Ladim, Mochei, Monachim, Alani, Intukana, Shot, Mochakim, Ashova, Chat, Sokim, Alani, Interena, Makot, Manukot, Kulot, Alian, Rabat, Tabachim, Alani, Shachana, Vesvatayim, Lobnachim, Shubachim, Alani, Imtizalachna, Zulot, Babachulim, Bitsimot, Slichim, Alani, Wach, Kodesh, Alani, Oi, Hakush, Menai, Mashu, Kwamudi, Edashu, Asudamati, Intolana, Nashim, Bilyam, Nashim, Mimelek, Nudash, Adonai, Kohen, Benavi, Iktlomash,
Next kinot that we recite is Yutet 19, the Shema Staka, and some on page 131, the Shu edition, or 2, the Ark Scroll 393, or 1, 2, 3 in the wisdom. Kinot really is very much change perspective. So simply devoting the pain, the suffering, the anguish, torture, the destruction, as we've seen in the previous kinot, which have all been an expression of Eicha. How did this happen to us? And these terrible events occur, and then expressing them in horrific detail, as we've seen. This particular kinot is from a very different perspective. It's essentially a Siddur Hadith, in which the Baal Kinot here expresses the fact that whatever befell us, we were deserving of. But we had opportunities, and we didn't fulfill those opportunities. They were given to us, we rejected them, and did so many times that ultimately we were given over to the enemy. The style of the kinot itself is based on possibly Daniel, the Hashem, Stopper, also the Father Moshe and Pamir. And therefore each stanza begins, first line is the Hashem and Stopper, second line is Father Moshe and Pamir. The Hashem and Stopper, meaning that everything that befell us was right, it was justice, making painful for us, but it was deserved. Father Moshe and Pamir, to us is the shame and the humiliation to be able to take up the opportunities to do true love. And we look at the first line, for example, the first stanza, the thought Hashem at start Tot Hashem later after you performed wondrous signs for us, you created the Jewish people, gave them the Torah. Yours is the right, the long bullshit upon. But we must be ashamed of that history. We would imagine we were examined by various tests, but we failed those tests, and therefore you rejected us. So understand the Father Shem and stuff that the glory of so We admit the fact that Parish Baruch took us out of Mitzrayim, land of perverseness, of sin, of wicked culture. However, what did we do? Did we remove ourselves from that culture and show ourselves to be different and deserving of that salvation? No. In the end, we ended up doing much the same as they did. We adopted their perverse customs. So rather, essentially, we have rejected the salvation of God. We just hate the cultural nations from which we were taken. And so it goes on. But it died on nearly him. Matan Torah, we accept the fact we witnessed as the leader would do. The witnesses of Har Sinai. However, for failure of the sin of God said on the very next line, what did we do? Just a few days later, we built the golden calf. We rejected the vision of our Baruch somehow. And so on and on, we were given gold and silver, and we made the golden calf. So ours is the blame. Baruch has acted correctly. If it's painful, then we have to accept the pain. The final stanza, the Parashat starts with Shameas Shama Shamaisa. We see we think that Baruch suppressed his anger and his punishment was for 900 years. We have 900 years worth of opportunity to repent and to repent, but we did not do so. And as a result, what met us was the destruction and suffering we as people had encountered. There's a lot of discussion as to what these 900 years actually were. Where was the 900-year period? Where did it start? Where did it finish? According to one view, seen from a logical point of view, started from the time when Israel arrived in Eretz Yisrael with Yehoshua. And that 900-year period roughly takes us to the end of Korban Bayis Rishon, the end of the first temple. There's the 900 years for which we as a people in Eretz Yisrael could have proven ourselves to be a big God's people. The Korban took place only at the end of those 900 years. Another possibility is that it starts from when Shlomo HaMelech built the first place Hamikdash. And the 900 years would then take us roughly to Korban Bayis Sheni, to the end of the second place Hamikdash. Seeing the two bottom Mikdash as if they were a single contiguous period, 70 years in between being just a temporary transition from Mikdash to Mikdash. We were given roughly 900 years of Mikdash time. And yet, during all that period, we weren't able to establish ourselves as a people worthy of God's divine gift to us. At the end, we met the destruction of Korban Bayis Sheni, which of course is still with us until today. So this is a Tziduk Hadin. We justify God's anger against us, and we accept the punishment. The Chorah and I have stopped the Sons Hashem. They are the Adata. A lot of those are following the Hinash and Tzrafnu for Son of Tiafta. The Chorah and I have stopped the going to carry the cup of the Sos. But on the Moshe are following the Tiafta for Bolu, and I'm saying myself. But I have stopped the whole for him with those slowly on. The lot of Moshe are following the young one, you have so destroyed and the heart with Moshe. So I have stopped the same about a time and near to him. So all of those is upon him for our faith, the sin, whom I said to him. So I have stopped the partnership upon him, the Peter's Bash. All of those is upon him, the other brothers, the one of Solas, for Shannon and Bash. So I have stopped the little model there, Armored on on. A lot of those is upon him, there, so Taylor was saying about him, but I'm not. I have stopped about it all of a silent dollar. A lot of bushes are pointed in the absolute number of that savers to keep the heart to the good. The father and I have stopped the Stephen and the hope of all my house and on. The lot of bushes are pointed off on a shemall that came and did so on. The father and I have stopped the father ship out of the house of the machine. The lot of bushes are pointed in 7 meters long after the machine. The father and I have stopped the Kimas Shiva, the known, the mother base and on it. The lot of bushes are pointed for recognition, it's a bonish and horrible, the woman of his body. The father and I have stopped the ship of the national horrible, the sailor, the other kind of it. The lot of bushes are pointed to shoot many of that upon the aid. The Toshub was aid in neighborhood. The four have been on and stopped over the Shanghai Sean our choice, that's in our push on the Shah. But one of which is upon it. The Salash of the Shiva, half day and the eyes of the thought Ushima.
I would say Aleph 21. The other page 134 in the short edition, 250 in the Art Scroll, 415 in the Coronet, and 135 in the Rosenthal. At this point, we change topics slightly. Until now, kinot have primarily dealt with Korban Beit Hamikdash. Now we begin to want other tragedies to take place, beginning with the persecution and the death of Torah scholars, and particularly the 10 martyrs of Lebanon. Be one of the most well-known kinot. We recite this twice, slight variations. We recite it on Yom Kippur as well. Yom Kippur, it's not a kinah as such, but it's a slicha, that the focus is on atonement. Whereas here the focus is on Tisha B'Av, the focus is on mourning. The dead, the righteous, is equivalent to the burning down of the Beit Hamikdash. The historical background to the story, that initially the Romans did not institute religious persecution. They thought that after burning down Beit Hamikdash, after the Korban would be enough, the Jews would assimilate like so many other nations did. The Jewish people don't give up so easily. Through the Bar Kokhba rebellion and onwards, it became clear. And the Romans then unleashed one of the worst waves of persecution we've ever known. These the 10 martyrs who were killed took place in different time periods, but over this broad period of time, according to Roman historian Theo, 985 villages and settlements were destroyed. 580,000 Jews were killed, possibly 1/3 of the population at that time. And all of Eretz Israel was laid waste. And so in this context, against this backdrop, we find the Maran Bava Batra, the Samach on the bed, which is a frightening statement. It says, in the wake of this persecution, at that time, there were voices in the Jewish world, in the rabbinic establishment, who said the time has come to stop having marriages, to stop having children. The Jewish people should come to an end of its own. Such was the shift, such was the crisis, and such was the trauma. As the background to these 10 martyrs. Of course, when you read this kinah, goes through them one by one, read by Rabbi Akiva, others. Now tells us the story. Rabbi Akiva, the one who could uproot mountains metaphorically. If the Salom Salkin, they combed his flesh, the Masleka Baldelish, the blood of the nine curves, Stan Shmatope, his heart and soul left the word it had, as I alluded to earlier. The Akiva in those moments saying, Shema Yisrael, even when he takes your life, even when he takes your soul. But your body is pure. every man of purity. And so it goes on. And you heard of Ben Bava, Rabbi Hanania ben Tradion, story, well-known story in the Gemara as well. Rabbi Hanania ben Tradion says, Hanania ben Tradion, Achalal Makir, Kilot, Betzion, Shalai, he gathered crowds to learn. Was at a time when it was forbidden. Yoshevet Olesh, Meseket, Olai, Imo, Yekifua, the Chavidei Mola, they enveloped him. They wrapped him in a Sefer Torah with bundles of twigs. When twigs, they set them alight to the fire which would burn slowly to increase the pain. Ta'olitidu behem u'kachul b'Sefer Torah v'al ha'ba'ala. They put moistened bits of wool in order to prolong the agony. Here the kinot will tell us the rest of the story. Return to the broken God and asked him, if you take those away, hasten my death and my suffering. And he said, if I do so, will I come into the world to come? And he said, yes, and so he did. As we go through this kinot, remember not just those martyrs, but all those martyred in every generation. Rabbi Batra tells us that Yosef, brother of Yeshua, had a near-death experience. He heard from behind the pargot, he heard from heaven. Those who were killed on Kiddush Hashem, those who give their lives for being Jewish are in the highest level in Shamayim, we can't fathom. And on this day, of course, we think that every one of our soldiers, every one of those martyrs, every one of those Kedoshim, 1,200, Simchat Torah, 100 sets. One more element that emerges from this kinot, and we'll see further in the kinot to come when we get to the descriptions of the great communities of Europe. We mourn the loss of life, mourn the loss of Torah, loss of Torah scholarship of a world that was destroyed and will never return. Yeah, this kinot begins as later by non Atileh Torah, Balet Lisin, Bamishnah, B'Malat, masters of Torah. And once these Talmidei Chachamim are taken from us so cruelly and so savagely before their time, that Torah they could have brought into the world is lost forever. And in our time, throughout this war, there are certain images that come to mind. Certain pictures which you may have seen. There was a photograph. Belisha Lowenstern, Shimkon Damo. Sitting and learning in Rambam, Yomi in Gaza, he never missed a day. There's the famous picture many of us have seen of Kiri Hester and David Schwartz. And we come to two Talmidim from Gush Etzion, sitting together, learning together. Long time for brothers who learned together, fought together, they died together. We could list the yeshivot, Eli, Har Etzion, Yerucham, Otniel, Karnei Shomron, Shalavim, to name a few. Many other Hesder yeshivot whose graduates, whose students who died in this war is in double digits. And we mourn for all of them. We mourn for their Torah, we mourn for that potential. The potential which they had to bring into the world. Like the 10 martyrs that we'll read about now in the kinot, the potential which was lost forever. Tamam nishpat kamayim v'nishnat gula hinam v'doshe elokei malchut asala v'eile ani bochia v'nihla zon v'zokli v'zak zaka gula u'mala shem ga'at Yisrael v'yakodesh nezer v'atala t'olei der k'doshe kodoshim shmitatam v'mitach ha'olam yatu gula milishon nechelet gula kinfor gula levi shimon v'chashat tamalo v'cha kinigzula gzila L'Rabban Shimon Chazal Egmon Ne'ulo B'nefesh Mitzvah Mizera Alon Shal B'Bakasha L'Kvod Al Bet Ben Akvila Natan Et Rosho Nazano Al Kuvotav V'Norah B'Olam Stam Einav Aleinav U'Pivativ V'Avat Mola Anav V'Amar V'Am Nitkaber B'Torah P't'or Nitkaza Alav Mitam Shulav V'Amula Stiva Anav Shivet Rosho Amenef Tzadar Stiva Kiyam V'Olo Amon Nafshech Shkli V'Navola
השעה חושך, עת הגיע למקום תפילין מצווה ברעה, שמעה צעקה ונזדעזע העולם וארץ התפוררה, תעמוד זכותו לדורות, כל הזרעים והדרה. מאחריו הביאו את רבי עקיבא, עוגר לי בתוך מצודו וזו בסברה, ובשרו משחקים במסרק הברזל השתפרה, יצאה נשמתו באחד, ובת קול אמרה רבי עקיבא אשריך, ובך תאור בכל מיני תאורה, בן בבא רבי יהודה אחריו הביאו, בתיכוני באזהרה, נהרג בן 70 שנה בתת השעה, יושב ודני תהיה נקי בחצי בבנתו מהרה, חנניה בן רדיון אחריו, מכיר קהילות בציון שערה, יושב ודורש וצוות תורה עמו וכיפור בחבילי תמורה, את הבור הציתו בהם ופרחו בספר תורה ועלו בו עטרה, וליבו ספוגין של צמר הניחו שלא ימות מימה. חסיד רבי ישבה וסופר, הרגו עם המורה, זרקו והשליחו לכלבים ולא באו לתורה. כל בת יצאה לה שלא הניח כלום בתורת משה ושמרה. את רבי חנינא בן חנינא בחרה רבי חוספית ביום אחד. מיד בפורח בא בגביד מזרחי בן תורה. צדיק רבי אלעזר בן שמוע. ואחרונה נהרג במקהלה. יום ערב שבת היה זמן קידוש ויקדש ויקרא. ערב שבוע עליו ולא ניבאו בחיים לסיים כלומר. יצאה נשמתו בדבר אלוהים יוצר בצר צורה. הנה כהנה וכהנה הוסיפו בני אברהם לענות בנהרה. בסקילה שריפה הרג וחנק מיוחד לשערה. נוטלת ממנה יאכלו על יוסף בצורה. יאכלו במקום קדוש כחדת בתרעה שם נאבד סליחה. פסח כלוכה ושוקת תרומה צרפו אריה באכילה. ייטב בעיני אדוני ולא יוסיף עוד לעשרה. חמץ ברגליים כושלות חלק יעקב ומושיע ועצרה. בצדק ימלוך מלך ושלום מלך לאורו נשחק מלך.
So, as Rabbi Kenessset said, we're moving on to tragedies in Europe. The First Crusade of 1096 was explicitly awful, and that's what's described in the next kinot. Beit 22. All the pages 137 in the Shul edition, 256 in the Art Scroll, 425 in the Torah, 127 in the Rosenthal. 140. Acharishu Imen. So the Gezerot of Tatna are described here, but I found in understanding them a work called Gezerot Tatna Rabbi Shlomo bar Rabbi Shimon, who was killed in the First Crusade. And this describes in detail what happened. I'm just going to read a small part just to give you an understanding. They started around Chodesh Iyar and ended around the time of Matan Torah in Sivan. It says as follows: Gimel Iyar, it was on the 23rd of Iyar, Kamu al Kahal Vermai. They came to the city of Vermaiza, Kahal Echtaku, the Shdekitot, and the community split into two groups. Mixtatan Nisharu Babatehen, some of them stayed in their houses, Mixtatan Barku Etzel Ha'igmon. Some of them went to the bishop. V'yakumu ze'evei arivot alutan shayu b'bateihem v'yishtedu anashim v'nashim v'tav nar v'zaken v'yapilu hamadribot. They started by killing all of the people in their houses, nashim, Hanashim, Ta, young, old, and they destroyed everything. Vishvalush, Alal, V'yavodu, Vaz, V'yikhu et HaTorah, V'yirmasua Petit, V'yikra'ua, V'yisra'ua. And as we've been noticing, unfortunately, all of these descriptions that I looked at all through the years, never imagining that they would happen in our day. This burning of the Torah and ripping of the Torah. They just destroyed all of Bnei Israel. And it was 7 days later. Yom Rosh Chodesh Sivan, on Rosh Chodesh Sivan, Yom Biyat Yisrael Sinai, V'kabel et HaTorah, U'redu Utam Asher Nisharu Adayim B'chatzera Rigmor. They came to the ones who were seeking refuge. The enemies came to them, just as they had of those who were in their houses, and they killed him. And one of the things that happened in this Masa Haslav, in this crusade, was that people actually killed their relatives. They would rather that they were killed by the hands of those who love them than by their enemies. And reading this is extremely difficult. I'm just going to read one more thing. V'yavdu kulam ish v'isha. This was in another community. V'yishchetu zeh lezeh, and they killed each other. V'amitulot v'kalot ha'chatanim hiditu ba'ad ha'alonim, and the young women, the brides, and the grooms looked out of the windows. B'tzaku b'kol gadol. They screamed, Abita, Ure'e Elokeinu, look at us. Ma anu osim al kiddushim ha'gadol. V'li la'amir otcha v'talui nitlav. Netzer miskal. They refused to give in, and their cries are found in the refrain that we read here in this kinot. Arid v'sichi v'ha'ima v'kol nehi harima. The tzaka of kaed, of pain that we feel. So, Acharishu Minen. Acharishu Minen v'edara v'yavor alayma. Amat ezar v'shor v'tasho pensh v'mayma. Tatzikani v'chi v'lo v'amitoli. Yulida ishab v'shema, Yitzchak esel otinen v'nima, Yivrei shanutai yitchu v'yama, Siti aladati asher yitzchak v'shema, Ari v'sichi v'ayma, V'kol nehi harima, Bech Shabbat v'sos v'simcha, Opening Aro v'kolosh kacha, V'kol zaken v'avo v'levanecha, Yaz nitomer lo'im, Az doresh shuka, Sila amirei hogeot v'necha, V'tolotai v'churai nasav v'simcha, V'rosh kol simso v'yolatam v'simcha, Olelai v'takai shtamu v'tzam v'timcha, Kevina alzot v'dimati aleka, Ve'esfu alai v'mayat zor nidaka, Arvot kapti u'narim tzevaka, Kevinu shamayim v'daraki adama, Amid v'sichi v'ayma, Volehi arima, Arivim son tzaku mara, Zefot amor etu b'chavura, Kol Techola Zara Kitatira, התעללו על הדת צורה, אני לא תנים זה גזרה, עבורי אף זן פרה, ונתכבדה בפגישות הרע, לקדש שם הגדול והנורא, ואיש את אחיו תזכו בעזרה, להידבק ביראת תורה, ויקראו על עבודה זרה, ולא כעסו על גבר וגבירה, על בנים ספירת תפארה, אבל עזרו גבורה יצירה, לחלום ראש ולפרוש ברדה, ולימוד דיברו במירה, לא זכינו לגדליכם לתורה, נקראכם כעולה בהכתרה, ונזכה עמכם נורא, רצפונה מעין כל ואומה, בריא ושיחי ואימה וכל נהי הריבה. אז הסכימו גדולים וקטנים לקבל בעבדים שוכן עונים, וזקנים דשנים ורעננים הם היו תחילה נידונים, ויצאו לקראתם עזי פנים, ונהרגו המונים המונים, ונתערבו בדרים עם פשטונים, והאבות אשר היו רחמנים, נהפכו לאכזר כעינים, והפיסו על אבות ועל בנים, ומי שגורל עלה לו ראשונים, הוא נשחט בטלפות בסכינים, ובחורים עלי תורה אמונים, הם לחכו עפר גנינים, בהקלות ובושות שנים, ובעפות בזרועות חתנים, כמתחות בחרב וכיוונים, וחוצות קהל עדת גדולים, ואל תחשו מקרבות קינים, והסבירו על חסידים ואמנים, אשר צללו המים, חסדים לזכר זאת נפשי עגומה. הברית בשיחי ואימה, וכל נהי הרימה, תורה תורה, עברי סחי ושיבר פרים, עברי יחיד הסילחה ומספת תנומים, אל תעשה משותייך ופרסים מסמורים, והלך ופורלייך במים בנים, אורחי וערכך, מיישרך הדורים, מהפני צלחנייך, מגלי סתורים, מי יתרצה בגבול, מי יסתת בהרים, ומי יפרק הוויות, ומי יתרץ שברים, מי יפליד נזירות, ומי יערוך נדרים, מי ישדר ממלכי וחצות ערים, מי יפול מלאכתך וישוב לשערים, כלי מלחמה עבדו ונפלו גיבורים, אשריהם משכילים כרקיע זוהרים, ומנחות שלום נפלו ישרים, אוי ואוי שוד ושבר לנותרים, ומצוות נפש וחבלים וצירים, וחביון עיניים צלמת שלוש ערב מי יצא הפרים, ובוקר מצרים יגלה חולים, ממראה עיניו אשר הבשר, ויפוס שפחה אחרת מימך כרמים, אז מתי ותמיד רואה כל סתרים, גלה לתורתך אשר סירופה זרים, ורעוע לבשרים, כסירים שלוחים הגדילו תנדורים, האל תדבק גדול כל יצורים, במקום דם הנשפך מים, משוד המים וחליפת צורים, עם שווה פשע לאונים המרובים, ומה מזעצה על צרים אסורים, עמך שסורות הרים וקרנם הגביה והרימה, הברית ושיחי ואימה, וכל נהי אימה.
Continue with the next kinot, which appears in the books, Kav Gimel number 23. This kinot is based on an important story. Here's the Gemara. Going back to the times of Churban, times of the Roman persecution. The Gemara tells the story of the son and the daughter of Rabbi Ishmael. Rabbi Ishmael, the Kohen Gadol, but his son and his daughter each taken captive
each taken captive by a different Roman slave owner. These two slave owners thought to themselves, one had a slave who was exquisitely handsome, one had a maidservant who was exquisitely beautiful, and thought we'll marry them off to one another. They can produce children, they can produce the greatest slaves for us. And it says that they put them together in a dark room, and they were there the entire night. They couldn't see one another. And each one of them, the son of Rabbi Ishmael, spent the whole night crying. How could it be? The son of a Kohen Gadol will be married to a slave. And the daughter spent the whole night crying. How could it be that the daughter of the Kohen Gadol will be married to a slave? The second last paragraph of the kinot tells us what happened in the morning. There's all book here, the lights, the break of dawn, there, here. They recognize what's not the hoy, achi, hoy, afot, feel. My brother, my sister. But in Chalku, Yachad, Ben Kabul, they embraced. יצא נשמתם ונשמע, והקימה מן הבנימין. Souls departed with one last breath, and I warned them from year to year. There's the story. Once again, the story has obvious resonance for us nowadays. First of all, the idea brother and sister coming together in the final embrace, turning their souls. We've all heard the stories. Purpose 7, Simchat Torah, some of the bodies which were found, which were unrecognizable, which were birthed. But many could be found, families hugging together, as the Sefer was set on fire. Parents and children tied together with metal objects. Children being tortured in front of their parents, parents tortured in front of their children. We can only imagine the fear, the horror. We can only imagine the thoughts that must have gone through their minds in those final moments. Secondly, of course, the kinot addresses the idea of captives. The children of the Kohen Gadol were taken as captives. We read in Eicha last night and this morning, the Turotai, Ubachulai, Alchu B'Shet. Taken captive again. How many of us thought, how many of us imagined that this would speak, that this would be so relevant to our days? Just one story, there are many we've heard of. As we sit here now, as we speak, so unthinkable things happening. Last night there was a message that came out. We don't know if it's true or not. Maybe propaganda, maybe psychological warfare, it may be real. Hamas announced that one of the captives had been killed, that two of the female captives had been injured. Again, don't know if it's true, but one story. One of the hostages was released, was not advice. Otherwise, was released in a hostage deal last year after 50 days in Gaza. She revealed one element of the horror in captivity. She said one of her Hamas captors told her they would get married. He bought her a ring. He told her she would stay in Gaza forever. Everybody would be released and she would have his children. That's what she said after she came out. Not at 18 years old, that on day 14 in captivity, she was given a ring. She was told she would have to be there and she would have to have his children. And that is same horror and that same fear. It's what we read about in this kinot. 23. בן אביך תדיר שמימה, ותימתי עליכי אסרימה, וביום זה מיד אימה, והאימה ימים ימימה, אבל במלכות חדת חתול, כל ציורי יותר גדול, ובן תגובת רבי ישמעאל כהן גדול, זכרם יגול בלבבי אסרימה, והאימה ימים ימימה, תשבו ונפלו לשני הדברים, והם שכנים זה לעומת זה אחרונים, ויספרו זה לזה עניינים, זה אמר משגיית ציונים, שביט תשפע לבושת שנים, כלבנה ותיגו כסתר פנים, ובתואר צייה בימימה, ולאימה מימים ימימה, ראינו סיפר לו בכפליים, הן הניבה משפיק ירושלים, שביתי עבד יפה עיניים, כשמש בתוקפו צהריים, ושר עץ מעיניים שלימה, והאימה מימים ימימה, בואו נחזקם ונחכה בינתיים, בגדול כמו כוכבי שמיים, לשם הזאת תצאנה האוזניים, לזכר זאת את מדי התמימה, והאימה מימים ימימה, הסכימו ועדות שניהם יחד, לאלף זיוון בחדר אחד, והעבונים בחוץ ליבם כאחד, והם בוכים במר נפש ופחד. הבוקר ותתם לו את מימה, והאימה מימים ימימה. תכפות בכל לבד נמצא, ננעל לו איך, ושפחה נושא, והיא גם היא ירם בזמן שעושה, ואת יוכלת איך לבד תנסה. בואי, כי זאת גזר אומר לו עושה. וזו הסיפורה שכסירו גימה, והאימה מימים ימימה. זה כאילו, אוי אחי ואוי אחות הרבירו, והתחבקו יחד ונתחברו, ויצאה נשמתם בנשימה, והאימה מימים ימימה, לזאת יכונן יום ושיעה, אם זה לעשות תמיד אני בוכייה, ולבבי יקר לכל אופיה, על פנו רק מספר רב האימה, והאימה מימים ימימה.
We will go on to kinot 25, okay, which is on page 144, the short edition 272, is the Art Scroll edition 455, the red edition 132, the rose edition. The Roshi Mai, the meaning of Conference Mai, this is the extract from Sefer. He Roshi Mai, the corner's line. Would that my head with water, my eyes a fountain of tears, and I cried all my days and nights. The corpses of my babes and infants in the age of my community. This is a tragic, and dramatic, again, following on from what we did before, dealing with the destruction of the Rhineland communities during the First Crusade. I spoke about the events, tragic eyewitness description we had of the horrors of the perpetrators. This kinot deals with the three particular main towns, the centers in the Rhineland communities, in detail describes the events, the dates on which they took place, where they took place, how they took place. Whereas the previous kinot Hacharisha in many was a more general one, about destruction of the Rhineland communities. This is a low account of each town. And the communities we're talking about are those of Speyer, Worms, and Mainz. They were really the crucible of terror in Europe. This is where the terror in Europe really started in Western Europe. The homeland of Rabbi Gershon, of Rashi, and all the Bali Tosfos. It was therefore their communities which were at this early stage destroyed by the Crusaders. This particular kinot is not just a kinot to mourn, to lament the destruction of individuals, and to the scholarship of those individuals. But in a sense, It laments the destruction or the near destruction of all Torah in Europe at the time, because this is where it was all based. I think probably many of us over here, if we had an ancestry chart, that would trace back our lineage to those who lived in those communities. They're Ashkenazi, there's quite a few charts on that. And the destructions are just of people and communities, it's destruction of all the material, all the library material, the scrolls before printing. It's a tragedy which is beyond all description. Even though it's said that maybe the number of victims maybe didn't exceed a few thousand, including many who took their own lives to prevent themselves being abused or not wishing to take up Christianity. And those, as we saw before, would kill their own children so that they would not be brought up in monasteries or whatever by Christians. The Gemara says that the death of Tzadikim is like the Korban Habayis, like the destruction of the temple itself. And therefore, on Tisha B'Av, we look at the destruction of communities, Torah communities, and others. And we just look at a few of the descriptions here again, as the Rabbi said a few minutes ago, we see that some of these descriptions of historical events are very reminiscent of much more recent events over here. The second paragraph, the Torah to my AD, the Elfa, the State, Baki, Mori, Leva, Panakokit, Makashit, of the Sulos, of the beautiful maidens, the Lodin Barakim, the young children. This is a very tragic description. The children, so to speak, were wrapped around with the sparring, they were killed. So, reminiscent again of the story of Hanania and Tarajo, who was burned within a Sefer Torah. They were slaughtered within their scrolls, etc. And the next stanza says, "A Torah b'Talmud v'halota." Where is the Torah to be found now? After destruction of these communities. The kinot continues to describe the destruction of each of these three major communities. The first one is shown here in the standard that is upper pines, mine, my islands will flow with water. Dema Hagira, Kone Mar, Harugi, Ashira here is fire. And indeed, the author of this kinot is Rabbi Kalun, Buddha of Shpire, contemporary witness of those events. And then goes on to say when it happened, what happened. It says that the old people and the young people all gathered together and they gave up their lives on Yichud Shem, on the Kiddush Hashem. Before in Torah, those days they were martyrs, brave and heroic individuals who died in the Kiddush Hashem. The next town mentioned is Worms, the Worms community. Wormar, you know, he won't speak. And then Hans mentioned Wormaiza, which is Worms. You should remember that Worms was the yeshiva town really for Rashi. Rashi learned at the yeshiva Rabbi Gershon, which was in Mainz. So all these communities were really very much the birthplace of the Torah Shabbat Pena in terms of its worship. Most of the partial Ashkenazis would be descended from there. And the next verse talks about Magenta, Diri Kahal Magenta, which is Mainz, Dura. And it says there that Al Shei Mikdoshai, of the two Batei Mikdosh, Al Chormos Ma'at Mikdoshai, with Reshe HaTorah. But we lament not just for the destruction of the two Batei Mikdosh, but on those which are Batei Mikdosh, small versions of those Mikdosh, which were these communities in the Rhine. Kodesh Hashlishi goes on to say in a later stanza, he said, in relation to Mainz again, B'Yom Matan Dat, this took place, as we said before in Sivan, this was the day of Shor, the day of Matan Torah. Sivan in his Ashra, we had hoped that we would be made sympathetic through the Torah. B'Yom Kasin of Third, And on that very day, which should have been Matan Torah, that's when the Torah was returned. In other words, instead of receiving the Torah left us on that day. On that day, the community of Beit Shor, which was its a backbone of Torah, saw its destruction. So Torah was taken from us on the day in which we should have been celebrating its being given to us. The final verse, but the next verse goes on to say that we really should be mourning the destruction of these communities, as we would do for any event on its own. It has to be a separate day. And separate Yom HaZikaron, other than Tishba, stanza said that we don't have the authority to initiate new days itself, something that Jews controversy when Yom HaShoah was implemented by the chief rabbinate, because this particular kinot says that we're not for the fact that we can't introduce new days of mourning. We would have done so simply with the destruction of these three red dryland communities. As we say this kinot 25 together. The integral Shimayim, the Amy McCormick's life, the Congo side of the guy, it's on the night of Pile on the line, she shake on the line. So I tell them, well, boy, you can the line, the foot back and around the area about Betsy Straw, but I know it, not prove it for it. But for us, in my event, for these papers, him, or I can't, more involved, and look him. And the solution, you're both, him or a king, to bring him to him. And I'll tell them, Ogwet and the names of the ribbon of him. Tit would says that or shimlish of him. So Tommy Coronado de Corre. There's this trail of Papa Glory, you have those for him. The same thing the morning, you will know, you bring the shadow, Sap and Tron has to go. Because the Coron is all Gamuda, the Lord Uda, Perkor Clayhead Dog, with Eagle Kuwash, Lord Gamuda. A term having crop and schnab at the door. And the phone is like the door, a term of the sound of the door. Although bottom the English shape for it, a face is thrown out of the knowing, look already. Fast up by the mind, then on a hero, a hundred man, and I will get a speeder. But Jenny was shown the world of young and the what, raw, go on into after you wine at the food of the hero. Everybody who is coming is a shade of the rock. Let's go yachad nafsham ishlimu b'ra. I give a shame and you thought you had to be b'ra. The borei chaya say b'ra ma'ara. The chalanai malumai nigvol kuloham asara. Of Isis for Muhammad Dai in a group for it. So my going of the lane of Iran, he's on Saturday, shall go some I love this of raw. Other results of the law who law the hoodie evidence in the Kiev or mine, it should shame on your brother of raw. The Esther was motion of Kurdish the Tara, Uma Kurdish Ashishi, the Korean Halevish raw, is legal not shown above the raw. Of Eva Aleham, the free Layla Hashra, Yuri Hestevan, who showed that raw, of a joy, Lord, in a blue and ولكن هذا جلطة الجراء الشرط هذا بيرويوس استطراء شنو نفسه مليء شيء من الراء فليس كشبه أنا كنفس مرا الشيء متوشان يستمر حياة القرى القربس نحن متوشان يدرشين التراء وليس الشرط أمام النوي كما يقول فورا خودش اشلیشی استاد نادان و ایوا خودش اشنه پاک لیاقت سالا یه مثلا داشت سپاسی استشراق یه میسی استاد خیلی خاص را also on a moral in call the ra in take up and our take of adoration of ra that they are we should have the issues about the ra base Israel by the door look for it. Similar Baba is made man for sure, Ishkudah, Microsoft, Isabel, Sabra, Srepa, Space, or angel of Lord Habira. The end of this word, Shepherd, the Sadira, the eight Hakim Zulasila, Ra, because Ken Hayam, as Ken Hayam, Liviosia, Ra, استدام الیام نفش ما را از خاصی کافدانی بلکه و آن البيت يسوع نقل النوع من الأيضا يلقي أبلي الأين هيمز بكران قبل الناس والأخوانات الإيب الياق وهذا يشمع صوت مقادير الناس يكون شكل الخير بخبرين الناس على الله على الخير وتعليم الناس والناس لتطبق سلطان حياة إرث بالناس يلك إيش سيبا المامين والناس لتعطيل ضمان ونعي وعرفين الناس أي ألهي وعمر سوء قطاع الناس يبقى يشير يحسير الشمس حسن يومي خانه فلسطين والناس شهر بسرعة فلسطين الناس بما نعلم أن يقاعدين إلهي هم يري أبيس إسرائيل وعطاين ينفلو إخارين أيني يورد لاين كنافة لهيبا الشرير وبين القلب قيمة الخفيف والقرار ليكن لي بحيمة الزرار حيمة بيوصل السهار الزرار أفضلني همماني حصار حسنان شباب السهار الزرار والقرار سلاح قلب يواي أتعوض السرات مقاصير الشعب فإن مسئول الزرار تياه ومنظر أين الغرار وكيما معتي شكراني أنا فأخي تمثي الاحتياج الزرعي البيت إسرائيل وقام الله كنحن إخاره.
Continue with the next kinot 26. This kinot, based on the Midrash, it's an imaginary dialogue between talks about how Yirmiyahu is told to go to the Marat Machpelah, go to the Avot to beg for mercy for their children. Time of the Quran. No one alive who could stop the decree. And so this kinot talks about conversation, so to speak, between the Avot, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, crying out, pleading to God to stop the Quran, and going back to the promises, going back to the Brit, going back to the merits which they have, and each time Hashem answers back and says, there have been promises, there have been zchuyot, look at what they have done. I have no choice. But as Baruch Yirmiyahu goes through and talks about how he says, goes to the bones, the patriarch, so to speak, and says, what are you doing? How can you lie there? How can you be indifferent? Perhaps, I mentioned earlier, it's a call to action for us as well. In the face of tragedy, in the face of what is going on, what are we doing about it? And he says, the children have been exiled, they're about to destroy it. Where is the Zchut Avot? Where is the merit of the forefathers? Go out. And so they go and they begin to pray. They begin to ask God, and we go through it. One of the later paragraphs says that Avraham, of course, refers to Abraham. Abraham turned to Hashem, he says, did I go through the 10 ordeals for nothing? But yeah, where are the promises? He answers back, what can I do? They've estranged themselves, they've worshipped idols. There's the 10 commandments, they have broken every one of them. How can I set that? So it goes through to Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe. Interesting, we see in the Kinah when it turns to Yitzchak, it's called Savach Yitzchak, Neshachak, Lashav B'Tevach Uchach, referring to the Akedah. Yitzchak said, was it for nothing that I was willing to be slaughtered? Then Zali Ishchak and Imchak, my descendants now are the ones who are being crushed, who are being wiped out. Where is the promise? Where is the promise of the Brit, the covenant to Yitzchak? We know there was a Brit, Abraham, there was a Brit to Yaakov. It's only the Brit to Yitzchak It's mentioned explicitly in the Skinan, and the Pasuk too, Zachatia, Etuti Yaakov, Etuti Yitzchak, Etuti Abraham Espo. It's only by the writ of Yitzchak that the word Zachor, the word remembrance, is not used. And the Quran tells us the reason for that. Midrash says that the ashes of Yitzchak are gathered and are lying on the altar. There is no need to remember, so to speak. Yes, the Akedah stopped. But in a certain sense, the ashes of Yitzchak are there. They are always there before him, and he needs no remembrance. That Akedah, that sacrifice. Yes, we've seen in so many of these kinot that don't take place once. In the days of the Apostle, it takes place every generation. Gemara gets in and goes through these stories of the Forban. There's a story of a woman with 7 sons. And each one of the sons was told to worship Avodah Zarah, and each one refused, and each one was killed. And the Gemara says, this is the Pasuk, we are killed every day, we are like a lamb to the slaughter. Referring to this, when they get to the last son, and just before he's put to death, he asks to speak to him. She says, go and tell Abraham. You sacrificed lamb. And I offered up 7. What is the Gemara trying to tell us? What is this woman trying to say? She's trying to go to Abraham and say, no, I'm not better than you. Seems very strange, but perhaps what she is saying is no. This is the Zchut Avot. How is it that we were able to make that sacrifice? How is it that we could do the superhuman act? It's in your merit, Abraham. Look and see what your children have done, the same way that you acted, that gave us the ability to emulate in your ways. The act of Abraham was willing to sacrifice, and the act of Yitzchak, who was willing to be sacrificed. How many Akedot have we seen this last year? How many without thinking, without hesitating, ran into the line of fire, continue to run into the line of fire, stand up to sacrifice themselves for the Jewish people. And in this kinot, that still is not good enough. It continues at the end, where we reach Samson's, with Rachel, and I conclude, Shubut Bimim Nochatem, you Yavot, Memahot, you can go back to your place of rest. I will fulfill your requests. We don't know when, we don't know how. Shulachti Babel Manchem, Nedim, Meshover, Galut Nechem will come to an end. I will bring the children back. Akapa. Spaloch Yemiyahu Kibrot. מנהל השמות חביבות, חנכם שוכבות, נכם גלו בתיכם חביבות, ויש זכות אבות בארץ חלובות, אם כאדם אבות ברית, ויש זכות בודת ברית, והוא כולם בקינים, החסרון בנים, והורדו בכל תחנונים ונשוכם מרונים, והגיע תחת זכת ימי ברית ראשונים, מה אעשה לכם בניי, זה רעים בפניי, הם העבירו כבודי בתוהו, ולא פחדו ולא ראו, והעלים עיניי מהם ולא שבו בנאו, ותתפק המנהלו, אם כאדם אבות ברית, יש זכות בודת ברית. זעק אברהם ואברהם, וכן פני אלבם, קנאת נושאת יסר בחינות אברהם, וחזית ישובם, ויהיה הבטחת אדיר ואברהם, מה אעשה לכם בניי, ושמיים בפניי, צאו לצרות, בעבודות צרות, יעצו לחצות בורות ושברות, ואיך תתפק על ביטול עשרת הדיברות, אם כאדם אבות ברית, יש זכות בודת ברית. פה צבח יצחק בני שוכן של החג, לשם ביטבח הוא חג, ואין זרים נשחק ונמחק, ויהיה הבטחה בבריתי אקים את יצחק, מה אעשה לכם בניי, זרעים בפניי, זרעו בירמיה ותימו על המוריה, נראיתי בסוף ראייה עולה משייה, ואיך התאפק על הריגת זכריה, אם כאדם הבורא יש בו זכות אלוהיס. תח יולד בטנף, תמות קטנים צולל, כל הלילה שטיפחתי בערב, איך גזו מהם בחרב, ואיך חוקרה מהם תמיד ודמים כמה ערב, מה יתן לכם בניי, תראה לפניי, שפח פורה נאמן, כפוש באפר, צול אשר לא תקיא האומן, איך גזו ולא זמן, ויהיה הבטחת כי לא אמן, אם כאדם הבורא, היסוד פרוטקרית, כל בחיליה מתופפת על לבביה, מכריח אותה ורקה לבניה, וזמרה מכה פניה, בלעה מקוננת בשתי ידיה, שובו תמימים למנוחתכם, מלא כל משאלותיכם, שולחתי בבל למענכם, וננים שובל ועדות בניכם.
Next kinot is H252B, Aleph 31, page 158, the Shield edition 306, scroll 515, column 144 in rows below. That's the first number I mentioned. First one is 158, 158 in the Shield edition. You have the Shield edition.
My task is to introduce the 40 kinot that we're reciting today. Some of you may by now be suffering from kinot fatigue. Perhaps some of you are sitting here out of a sense of duty or respect for tradition, maybe losing a little attention, or secretly wanting the whole thing to be opened up. These feelings are natural, we're very human after all, but is this what we should be feeling? Incidentally, it's not just Tisha and the seemingly endless kinot that we went through it. Some of our fellow Jews in Israel have said to me over the past few days that they just wish the Iranians would get on with their revenge attack so we can get over it and done with it and just get back to normal again. But both with kinot and with attacks from our enemies, there is no normal to get back to. One miracle for which we should be fervently praying. When we wake up tomorrow, we'll still be missing our Beit Kenessset. There'll still be no providers. And our Kohanim will still be davening here in the Gavia, not down the road to the Eretz. Likewise, even after Iran and Hezbollah do whatever they do, if they get round to doing it, we'll still have the same enemies and face the same problems. In each case, we look forward to the day after. Do we have an action plan for what to do the day after when it comes? Now, my kinot is here. H252 is a very special one. And I'll soon tell you why. But first, I want to say something about Tisha B'Av last year that applies to this year as well. I was given the kinot to introduce last year, and when I did so, I was a bit critical of it. What I was actually trying to say is that Tisha B'Av is a time of national and personal mourning for tragedies that continue to be felt. But my kinot didn't move me. It was an elaborate, beautiful, poetical account of the sincere feelings of somebody who was not there at the time of the problem, and it seemed to me somehow wrong for me to recite someone else's feelings in order to conjure up in my heart the emotions evoked by words that were appropriate for him on this day, but which just didn't work for me. We're not always very good at showing our national grief, but sometimes I wonder if we're not even very good at feeling it. And kinot can be very hard in this regard. For me, that day in the month of Nahimah is the day for acknowledging a pain that we should be feeling in our hearts. It's not the date of the annual general meeting of the Jewish chapter of Dead Poets Society. In saying this, I just quote one of my Gettysburg stood up this week. The recitation of kinot should be an understandable and meaningful experience. Yes, we must ensure that the kinot are understandable and meaningful, but we must also make them an experience. Are we experiencing the pain, distress, the anguish, sense of loss, personal failure, because our generation has been able to restore the best of it? Or are we really just comfortable also we're going through the motions? We must make that effort to make our recitation as moving as the excellent explanations that precede. Fortunately, I do not have any problems with my kinot this year. H2 is, I believe, the epitome of what an effective and meaningful kinot should be. An anonymous kinot, it has rhyme and rhythm. It is memorable, being built with words and phrases we know, or which we can identify. It is scarcely any textual explanatory poetry at all. So many of the textual allusions are drawn from that. In short, what does this kinot do? It packs a punch, it leaves a mark. More than that, it finishes on a positive note to leave us on a high. It's something to which we can fervently look forward. The complete and triumphant return of Plan Israel to Yerushalayim. This is our scenario the day after. We already have our plan for the day after. So make the place of Mikdash, it's a proper place for us to be there to dwell. Amongst us, here in Yerushalayim, the capital of a safe, secure, and united Eretz Israel. That is why in so many congregations, this kinot is not just recited, it's sung with defiance, resolution. Yes, we have to accept God's judgment of us, but we still can look forward to his ultimate redemption. The structure of H2 is worthy of note. Like many other kinots appear to, it's arranges an acrostic, with the first is being ordered from Aleph to Tav. Not that the alphabet only has 22 letters, there are actually 23 verses in this kinot because it opens with two successive Alephs. Each of the 23 verses is split into two halves of equal length. First half ends with the words that says he been Israel when I went out from Egypt. The second, in contrast, ends with that says he been Yerushalayim when I went out from Jerusalem. In every verse, each of the two lines is itself broken further into two rhyming segments, again both adding power to the meter of each line, and making it easier to recite and remember. The bifurcated arrangement of each stanza, setting off the exodus from Egypt with the long trek from Yerushalayim into exile, is the reason why this kinot is so clever, so suitable for recitation. We have a Torah mitzvah of remembering the Tzir Shrine every day. That the Seder, we don't just remember it, we feel it, we act it out, we envision ourselves as though it's we who are personally leaving Egypt. In contrast, there is no Torah mitzvah of remembering the Tzir Shrine, obviously. When we recite the second half of each verse, this kinot, we still have the vivid imagery of Yirmiyah's depiction of this disaster in Yedot at the forefront of our minds. So it's not hard for us, or shouldn't be hard for us, to see ourselves at the same time as both marching exultantly into the Midbar under the leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu and traveling down the mountain tracks that lead away from our once incredible holy city. The contrast between these two tracks is actually enhanced and emphasized by the meter and balance of each verse. It stanza after stanza, pounding rhythm of each line, each benefit, each gain, is precisely cancelled out by the symmetry, the line that follows it, that hammers out our loss, our disgrace, and our degradation. And one final thought to leave you with. Most of us here in this school today are, shall we say, a little bit on the elderly side, but we were not always so. Many of us, as children of the 60s and 70s, have likely absorbed many messages from that era, which, like things which we hear when we're young, stay with us for a long time. But here's one that stuck with me throughout my adult life. Some of you may recall the lyric from the Joni Mitchell number back in 1970, the song called Big Yellow Taxi. There the chorus repeats the words, "Don't I seem to go, you don't know what you've got till it's gone." This refrain hits the nail on the head. H. It's the song of "We didn't know what we got till it's gone." We didn't realise how good our good times were. We didn't know how much we appreciated them. So we finally had to accept that we'd lost a lot, everything. And like Joni Mitchell, the anonymous author of History Company TV reminds us of God's promise that He will never leave us destitute. In triumph, we'll return. But if not this year, He's got the next. So I think we sing this kinot together. Stand.
ושלח בזרע חתוניתך, צאתי לושוש אויבי, ושלח ודבוע, ושלח נירו, שצאתי לנגויים, נגולות מרוע ורוח חתומה, וצאתי לושוש אויבי. ישועה, וחצר חתומה, וצאתי לנגויים, זכר סלום, זכר סלום, וצאתי Children, raw, forgive, raw, it's a seed, it's probably, and if the way go, and settle my table, it's basically children. Lay my hand, it's a seed, it's probably, so I'm the father of your that should be children.
We're going to move straight on to Kinot Lamed 36. In the Shul edition, it's on page 168, the art scroll 326, Purim 555, Rosenfeld 152. This is really a change in the
Mentioned
168. This is a change. We're now moving a bit, and as we all know, the afternoon of Tisha B'Av is not just about the morning, but it's about hope. It's about potential, and I think we've all seen throughout the horrible times that we've been through some of the amazing things that have happened. The dedication of people one to the other, the amount of time that people have put into miluim, to packing food, to giving tzedakah, to giving up of their own in order to help others and to support the community. And the kinot that was written by Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, Beyond Aloti Shali, we see in it the beauty of Eretz Israel, beauty of the land, and really the reason that we're all here. The combination of the beauty and the Torah and the community that we're trying to create here. And that's what this kinot is about. And as it opens, Sion, Aloti Shali Shalom Asirayich, we can't help but think of the Asirim that are still in captivity. And as Rabbi Kingsburg said, we've heard from those who returned what it's like to be in captivity and what they experienced. And I think we can only understand a small amount of it, but we can imagine those who are still there and how much we want them and all of us to be able to think about the beauty of Eretz Israel, to enjoy the beauty of Eretz Israel, to Tayel Ba'aretz. That's our hope, and that's what we pray for us. That we hope that future conditions soon. We will now recite Sion. Sion, Aloti Shali Shalom Asirayich, Roshesh Tomechem Yeder Adorai, Mayim Yisrael Yitzchak B'Teiman, Shalom Rachot V'Karov, Sei Mikol Adorai, Shalom Asir Tava, Noten Ma'av Etach Remal, V'Nichsach V'Yodechem Al Harabai, V'Kot Emutech Imi Detani, Ve'et Achalom Shivat Shututech, Ani Kenor Leshirai, Libi Rebeit El, U'L'Tiyel V'Ot Yehemet, V'Machanayim V'Ot Yehei Norai, Sham Ashkina Ashkina היוצרך פתח למו שערי שפר שערי, ולבוא למלאי היה לעורך, בין שמש וסהר, וכוכבים מעלי. אבחר נפשי להשתתף, במקום אשר רוח אלוהים שלוחה, על בטולי. את בית מלוכה על כיסא אדוני, ואיך ישבו עבדים עלי כיסאות יברייך. מי יבננו משוטט במקומות אשר נבנו אלוהים לאחוזייך וצירייך. מי יעשה לי כנפיים וארחיק נדו, אני בביתרי ובבי בנבחרי. וכל לאפי אלי ארצך, ארצה עלייך מאוד, ואפנה את אחריי. כי בעמדי על קברות אבותיי, ושכונן בחברון, עלי נבחר דברייך. אור וירח וקמילה, ואמור ויראה, ושכוננה אל הר עברי. הר העברים והור ההר, אשר שם שני אורים גדולים, מעירייך נוראי. חיי נשמות אוויר ארצך, ומאור נור חדחד, אפרך ונופצות ונהרי. ינם מנפשי הלא ארום ויחד, עלי קרבות שממה אשר היו דברי, במקום ארונך אשר יהונס, במקום אלוהי, אשר שכנו אחרי עברי. ככל רשתי פרק ישראל, וכל כבד מעט את יזרי, את ירבי הכל שתות ואת יסתה, כי יסבר הרבים את כיפרי. או את מאוד ימים בטוב ואלי, או נראה בפי עובדים נגרשת נשתרי. עוז עגונים מעט וחרבים מעט, כי פער בנות שרה נפשי במאורי. את אסתרה אלה אשתה חמתך, אזכור נזרה ואצלה את שמרי. ציון תפילה יופי, אהבה לכם הקשורים יד, טובה הקשרו נפשך חברייך. הם השמחים לשרבתך הכהנים על שמותך, ובלתי על שברייך. מדור שלי שואבים נגדך, ומשתחווים ישנו לקומו, כאלי נוכח שערייך. עבודך אשר אדוני נצפנתו בהר לביבה, ולא שקלו גדרי. המחזיקים בשוליים, ומתאמצים לעלות ולאכול, וסנסיני תמרי, שירר ושתרוס וירח וגודלן ועת גדלן, ידרו בתומי כברוי. אלא מפני דברים משיחי, ואני נביאי יתברני, לביאת ושרי, ישרי ויעקות וכל ממלכות האוויר, עושה לעולם ודור ודור נזרי. יברח ומושב אלוהי ואשרי אנוש יבחר יתקרב לשכון בחצרי. אשרי מחכה יגיע ינאה אבות מורה, ויברכע עליו שחרי, ולא תטובה בחירי, ומעלות ושמחתך ושובך דרך כתבת לאחורייך.
Going to skip a number of kinot on the sheets. We're now going to say number 41 Mem Aleph. After that, we'll conclude with the contemporary kinot and the Hadithiyah. Number 41 Mem Aleph. This is in the shul edition, small white edition, page 181. In the art scroll 358, in the foreign 591, and Rosenfeld 161. Sharis Rukha the kinot was written by Maram Rotenfeld. Rav Rottenberg was the teacher of the Rosh, the last of the Beit Kenessset. And this kinot follows very much the style of the previous kinot which we've just written. The topic is very, very different. This kinot was written after the burning of the Talmud
took place in Paris in 1242. Burning of the Talmud, which was done by the church, it's not just a small revenge act. This was a systematic plan to try to raise Torah. Trying to raise Torah Sheba'al Peh. They went and they gathered all the books that they could from all over Europe. You know, think of book burning. It sounds like something bad. As Eddie mentioned before, this was the day before the printing press. Was a tremendous catastrophe. The amount of time and expense and effort that was required in order to write books, and nearly all the manuscripts we have from that time in Europe were lost. It's one manuscript which survived. But there was a real fear, a real catastrophe here, a real fear that Torah would be lost, Torah Sheba'al Peh would be lost. And the truth is, there are many books we have, many manuscripts which did not survive the ages. And Maravi Rottenberg writes this kinot. There's a sense of almost despair, doom and gloom as we go through it. He speaks at first, he addresses the Torah itself, he addresses Har Sinai. And he asks the question, how could it be? Contrast the fact that the Torah, we're told, was given by Esh. The opening of the second paragraph said, which was given by Hashem himself, is called an Esh Shokla, an all-consuming fire. How could that, how could that be consumed by fire of flesh and blood? How could the enemies not themselves have been burned in your embers? That's what we said earlier in the kinot relating to Titus. And it continues in the kinot a little bit later. I will cry. Tears will come to the graves of your two noble princes, Moshe and Aaron. And I'll ask them, Moshe Aaron, Aaron is buried in Aaron, of course, Moshe Rabbeinu is buried. But he asks them, how could this be? How could this have happened? Is there a new Torah that has been given that's such that the old one could be burnt? Again, the association here of Chodesh Lishi of Sivan, the time when the Torah was given, now the Torah was taken away again. So then all this happened on the week of Parashat Chukat. Because there was a custom for many years, many communities to fast on the day of the week of Parashat Chukat because of the result of this event. And that's when we read Zot Chukat Torah. For those who understood, this is the Chukah, this is the Gzerah, this is the decree that emanated against the Torah. And he goes on, he said, how will I ever be able to eat again? How will I ever be able to rejoice again? There's a real fear, there's a real distress, real mourning over the Torah which was lost, and fear of what will be in the future. So again, 41 Shalom Sucha Ba'esh. Shalom Sucha Ba'esh, Shalom השפכים באפת ארץ וכואבים המשתוממים עליהם מוקד גדליים. ומתחילים חשכים בהם עולם, קרובים דור יום, והם משכים פרח בליל. ושלום בראש נענך, בוכה בלב נשבר, תמיד בפונן עלי, סדרי חוללייך, ויתונן כדמים ופנות יענה, ויקרא מתפד מר בגלל עלית. איכה נתונה באש בוכלה, צורוקה באש חסר ונכבוד גרלים ולחלייך. על אן עדינה תשכחנה ברוב השקט, ופני דרכי אנוך אסור חוללייך. ישב מאוד גם לפחות פניהם בכל המשפטים, ותבליק בגלייך, עוד תגזור לסופת האש בחוקים, ולכן אשרי שישלם לך מולייך. צורי ונביא באש על בעבור זה נתנך, כי באחריתך תלהית אש בשולייך. סיני עד כן בך בחי אלוהים, ומאס בגדולים זרחתי גולייך. להיות למופת לדעת כי תתמעט ותרד כבודה ואין אמשול בשלייך. משל למלך אשר בחד משתי בנו, צפה שיקבע כן עד למדייך. תחת מהיר תפנה סיני לפושחה בשק, תעתר לפוש אלמנות אך לפסמן לעיני. הוריד דמעות עתיד יהיו כנחל, ויגיעו לקברות שני שרי הצליים, משה ואהרון באור ההר, וישאל, היש אור חדשה לכם יסמכו בלילייך, חודש שלישי ואוקשר מעודיעי להשפיך חמדתך, וכל יום בלילייך, ואדם מנוחות כל שנה מברכו בסוף פשע, הספר שלו שלנו. תשמע לנפשי, איך ירב לחיק יכול, אחרי רותי אשר אספו שנתייך. הטוב ובובה כמדחת, וזורקו שלנו עליון, אשר תמאס בבוקר עלייך. לא ידעה וצוברת גדולה, אחי הנגיעו הבנות כתיב יושר סלעייך. יוצא כתיב מדבר לסוף ומשפט במות, לא מגביל להיות כבוד כבר עלייך. נערב לעיניי, שרוב באמת דמעה אליי, עד יחדו לכל מחזיק אחד מאלייך. רק יחלפו פריטה מלחיי, עברו כי נפלו רחמי נדות עלייך. לקח צור כספו ענק בדרך ומרחוק, ואמרה ברסות עלייך, ואני שפול וגלמוד נשארתי לבד מהם, ותורם בראש העמדה עלייך. לא ישמעו לכל שרים שרות, שורים ושרות, עליהם כי נתקו מטרי דובך עלייך. דבש וקש ושק, לימוד יקוב, עצמו בכל ירביון נשות עלייך, את מאה מאוד על היום, אשר יזרחק כל לבן, יחשב אליי ואליי. זעקי בכל מר וצור, על שפונך ועל חולייך, ולא יזכור בכלולייך, עברי בגוש צעק עליה ברמה, אשר יצא לחלק, וסתן כלולייך. אמור תנותך, נחמך, צור וישיב שבות שבטי שבוע, וירדים את שערייך. עוד צעדי ועדי שנים, בטוב תקבי, תרשי מחול, וצעדי בצולייך. ירדום לבבי, ועת צורי לעונה, יגיע לך לשכם, נתחיל בפתח. There's a handout that's going around with the Shoah, kinot for the Shoah.
If you're lucky to get one of the rare packages of staples, which have a listing of kinot uses, there wasn't that many of them. You'll find this preferred kinot staple below. If you are lucky enough to have an answer kinot, then I think you'll find it on page 510. It's page 510.
In Zechor Nafis and Bekiah, by the Book of Barah. Just say two things before we leave this kinot. Adding in new kinot nowadays is not without its controversy. As we've seen throughout the ages, the Jewish people felt that Tisha B'Av was not just about Quran, all the tragedies that took place since, were added throughout the generations. And the Shoah is something of such measure that how could we not add a kinot for that? In the 1970s, Rav Nachum Mendel Kasher said that he could no longer say kinot for the ancient great communities of Europe, of the Rhine, and Tavoyam, Shvayim, and Magensa. He said it doesn't speak to him anymore when we're not speaking about great communities of Europe that were destroyed in our days. And in the commentary to one of the kinot, Rav Soloveitchik makes the following observation as well. In Kinot 17, which we said, it's that one of the lines there was Tish'a Kabir Mochei Ladim Ulazim. 9 large measures of crushed children's brains. They killed babies by swinging the baby by its legs, attaching his skull against the wall. That was in the days of the Beit HaMikdash, but he says this happened as well during the Nazi regime. Whenever atrocities are related in connection with the Churban Beit HaMikdash, happened with more cruelty and on a larger scale during the Nazi period. There is not a single detail which Rabbi Elazar Kali reports from the Midrashim about sages which did not occur in the 1940s in Lithuania, Russia, Poland, Hungary, Romania.
Okay, there was another kinot, you have a package which follows it from Schwab. We just went to decide the first, which is the one by the Barah. I just want to add a little note, which is appearing in the Archwell commentary about the authorship of the particular kinot by Barah. He was asked to do so. He was himself a Holocaust survivor, lost very many of his family, the Holocaust. When he came to America, he was asked to write kinot. For many years, he refused, but he didn't feel that he was at the status of Rabbi Elazar Kavir, that he could write a leader for the kinot, that would speak to people, that would have the right to world. Until one day he was learning a particular sefer. It was the sefer of a Kabbalist in Tzfat. In that sefer, I'll quote you what the sefer said. He found this: Whoever can wail on this day, Tish B'Av should wail. And whoever can recite kinot should recite kinot. Either those are already recorded in the holy books, or the kinot he himself composed with the intellect God has granted him. It is a mitzvah for each and every individual to compose kinot for weeping and moaning and to recite them on this bitter day. One who does this is considered most righteous and is worthy of being described as one of Jerusalem's mourners and one of the holy men. One who is not capable of composing his own personal kinot should recite the kinot written by others for instinct. And the Rebbe said that when he read those words, he saw a clear sign from heaven. The time had come for him to compose a kinot over the last Purim. But doesn't say that you say that any person, even the smallest, should express his own feelings in his own original kinot. Okay. We start kinot here. Zimbrullah, V'Kodeinu Kol Yisrael Kol Lechem Yishama Barama Yishiva Germania Sameya V'Imei Zam HaMilchama V'Yisos Yishnolos HaToyos Barov HaTzoma Al Tishtachu B'Chol HaDoros Ad Eitzol L'Mos HaNechama והפסוק מבחינותיהם שרופים פלולים ואחרונים כפסון הצמח יבולו לשריפו והקישונים כל שלום יזוכה תמיד לפני שולחים מלאים וקרוב שמע ישראל מוסרים נפשם לאדוני ואדונים לא שישרו את תלמידיהם והנני המחור שמה העבידו בעינויים קשים הרבו וירומו ובני ילדים רבים צועקים אליך מן האדמה Depending must have been a shameless of a conditional. After it was helping the process of taking these years, Ruvos is ranked so regular on the command machines. Shilkuish Mikoshe Ale, it seems to be names of years. The shining and the ears of Era, Yoki Badorium on eight years. Zarathushamai Radoma, and Alpia Yoros, the ranks of Ra, so the poor killers there are. Look at the kind name of Sarah, but the kids came in because he did the Rekay and Mullah Ra. The young Danilo may have said no law, for the Kilo Yonder Ra, Rahim al Shay Hussein of Habet Nomish and Mai, the Machanos had the ocean, the Esek, the Hussein, Israel, and many days for Shaynu, the Mahmenu, the Kifmai, Remenu, Habienu, it's Yon, the Husholai.
Okay, final report is ready to see on. Think of fathomably, we have a new kinot. We have a new kinot, Simchat Torah, Shmini Atzeret, and Fasting of Oleinu L'Tugak L'Deret, where dancing was turned into grief. Remember here, we didn't even get to the dance. This day, the fences were breached, and the towns, Kim, Sterot, etc. This kinot was written by Yosef Tzvi Rimon. Writes how the introduction which he wrote to the kinot, how this is the worst pogrom that we've experienced in the land of Israel since the days of Bar Kokhba. The observation was made quite soon after the events of Simchat Torah that this was the day in which the most number of Jews were murdered since the Holocaust. Again, compared to the incomparable tragedy of the Holocaust, there's a drop in the ocean. Nonetheless, it's, as we said, the worst pogrom in Israel since the days of Bar Kokhba. Says Rav Rimon, at the same time, there is something unique about this pogrom. That it was the first time in history that after such was perpetrated against the Jewish people, we got up and we fought back. Continue to fight back to this day. This is where we are in this strange and complex and difficult reality between grief and mourning on the one hand, pride, the ability to fight back and defend ourselves on the other, the beginning of the Geulah, fight the Geulah. So that is this kinot is written with these conflicting emotions in mind.
many references here to Psukim, to Midrashim, etc. It's written in a language that's quite understandable. The second paragraph, it's about how our land was humiliated, but Hamas. It was a reference to the date of Noah, but Hamas, there's no elaboration what that refers to, the evil which came from Gaza. It talks about how the place of that which should have been on Simchat Torah, we remember, and Torah was cancelled, the Torah was cancelled. It took place instead of the Hakafot, people were running for their life for pure kidnapping. The place of Pilat HaGeshem, Yamad Lodina Ogat HaBosim. That's an analogy because people, metaphor for those who killed. There in Chilul Hashem, it took place the 76th year, across the 76th year of the United Israel. Timrot Hashem Dam Va'esh. It's the reference to what we said tonight. The plagues. They perpetrated against our enemies, they are perpetrated against us. But people are hiding in fear. The killing, the plundering, the captivity, the rape. The great Chilul Hashem, we spoke about earlier, top of the second page, for Yom Shimchai Halal. When he was defiled, it talks about the soldier support of them. And it goes on and it talks about the other threats, the other enemies that are threatening us. Towards the end, the waves of hate which engulf the world. It ends up with a prayer. With the future and a prayer of thanks, I'll just read the last two paragraphs and translate them, and then we will start the kinot together. As Hashem Chatufim, Kadol, Shvoyim, return the hostages, in freedom for those in captivity, Akul, Wim, Baba, Petachim, farm those who've been uprooted, Shakem, Tsuim, Omem, Nitkaim, rehabilitate the wounded, raise up the depressed, Nahelat, the Father, Hesed, Abraham, lead us with kindness, with mercy. Modim Anachnu Lacham, Medinatenu, we give thanks for our state, God will take on to Nafshenu. Me'uchadim, Tzolichenu, Kuriyot, Laltenu, lead us together, lead us united, upright in our land. Naftesh David Mashas.
Not so much on as articles, on the axon, sister people, will say of my spiel, the big articles, in front, the Philadelphia, your other leader who goes on the set, will shine on your body, who can do a shame, in the rocks of him, I can take your shame. Oh, Krishna, Shirim, Goshesh. If I was not for age, you need not for the rock on the page. Shall ask her this. Oh, I see your higher for it. Not to be that I must in my regret. But to say that in a suit in the market. It's not to be that I'm not it. If I thought it's well, I did the question of the I beg to pray, come on, it's so I skate around, say, oh, what a seal of the soil. If large and not low, I'll get so well, it's in my movie. I need a question, it's all I needed. People are somebody else who I tell not it. So I'm say, oh, of the movie. I am, it's my honor, no say, no. Draw the big super world, something do not show them home, but if people do, people are paid of their family, pass our pain. I shall have a big Russian. But hell must give very subtle say no. It's a phone in the world, in the other say no. It's a phone in the world, say no. or we say for us, your blue animals, on top of shows, who are say the pinners, to the Yashu, and I have your colors, as it is for all God's heroes, and play the love, and play the story. Well, over evil, righteous by your name, and we are the country, as paper of the me. Lays it all, shut it all, no matter what. Certain thoroughly my appreciation therefore, but it is not all and regular therefore. Boy, ye not take the belong for. A shame to me, cross road as to you. Glory, husband of him, shall take the to him, relate it for him. I love of Father, as ever around him. If I have no love, how will he not say good? How could I say no when they say no? Oh, for the funny I know, the God say no. I hate that going, she
Final kinot, stand just a moment. The theme of this kinot, we'll sing together, is that no matter how much we have mourned, no matter how much we have cried, it's not enough. We're only just beginning. If we truly comprehend the extent of the tragedy, of the mourning, of the grief, what it means to live in a world post-Korban, with its consequences of Esther Banev and of Korban accompanying our lives every single day, we cannot think that we've ticked the boxes. We cannot think we've done enough. And that is why for over 2,000 years, the Jewish people have never stopped mourning for Jerusalem, for the rebuilt Jerusalem. At the happiest moment of our lives, we smash a glass, sign of mourning. This is unlike Abelut Hadashah, when a person is mourning for a relative, by which we are told there is a limit. There is a time when one is not allowed to mourn anymore. There is such a thing as too much grief, but when it comes to Abelut Shana, to the mourning for Yerushalayim, no such concept exists. To the contrary. And in this kinot, we are told, just as a woman who is giving birth, who feels the excruciating pain of labor and has no choice but to cry out. So too it should be for us when we think of the Beit HaMikdash, when we think of Yerushalayim, we think of the Shana, we have no choice but to cry. The kinot changes the metaphor to a newlywed bride whose young husband has just died. This is something which we've experienced and seen in our days as well, tragically, just 2 days ago. I mentioned last night, Jonathan Deutsch was killed in a terror attack in Deutsch of Beit Kenessset. He was killed in a terror attack in the Jordan Valley. He had just recently gotten engaged. His fiancée will never have the privilege to marry. Throughout this war, we have seen widows, orphans, we have seen children who have been born as orphans with no fathers. As the Pasuk we say towards the end of Eitan, the last chapter, Yitomim Hayim V'nei Av, we are like orphans with no father. How relevant have those words become? Proof of this I heard a number of months ago in an interview with Chagai Luber. Chagai Luber, his son, Yonatan, was killed in the war in Gaza. And a few months later, his wife gave birth to a son. Brit Milah was there. There were videos. It was incredibly, incredibly emotionally charged. And one of the things that the grandfather said, the grandfather of the baby who will never know his father, so we have to be happy. We have to feel joy. We have to give this child the life that he deserves. But there are two chambers in our hearts. He said there is a chamber of joy, and there is a chamber of sadness. Those two will always coexist. They will never go away. The chamber of sadness, that sadness, no matter what happens, will never ever disappear. It will always be there, like an open hole. So it is that we relate to the Beit HaMikdash. So it is that we relate to Yerushalayim. And that's the message of this final kinot, that we will never, we may go home and we stop saying kinot, we will never stop our mourning, we will never stop our yearning, and we will never stop our longing for a rebuilt Jerusalem.